Jeremy Veldman. Welcome to another episode of Telescope Tips. Now today I'm here with Keith Latulay, and we're going to talk about astrophotography, a pretty serious part of the amateur astronomy hobby. And I tell you, this is a whole nother area in and of itself. And Keith is one of our resident experts. This is something he's done regularly, both at home and at observing sessions. And I tell you, I'm kind of a regular observer, so this is a whole area that I haven't even delved into myself. But some of you may be considering this, and Keith is certainly a great resource in our community to learn about astrophotography. Now, as the name implies, you're taking pictures of celestial objects, and it's not as intuitive to those who don't maybe understand this area, because it's not as simple a matter of just taking out a phone or a camera and then pointing it at something and taking a picture in a minute. There's actually a whole process involved in gathering the light, concentrating it, and then developing the image.
Absolutely.
So there's several layers to this. So Keith, why don't you just kind of give us a broad overview of astrophotography?
Sure. It's those little fuzzies that you can't see, that after you take a picture of them and take a number of pictures, put them together, and you've got this unbelievable picture. But it's something that you can't see with your eye, because obviously your eye doesn't work that way. It doesn't stay open like a camera lens. A camera lens can stay open for minutes, 10 minutes at a shot or more, and they're focused directly on those little fuzzies, and they come out really clear after you do a lot of processing.
I tell you, you've taken some incredible images. I've seen some of those. I mean, the Orion Nebula, the Flame Nebula, some galaxies. Talk about some of the images that you have taken over the years.
Sure. You know, it's one of those things. It's a constant learning curve. Trust me, I'm still learning. Some of these images, you would think that you finally get to the point where every time you set the scope up, every time you point at something, you get this unbelievable image. And that's so far from the truth. It's potluck. It really is. Some days you're going to have great seeing, temperature is going to be right, and the focus is going to be terrific. And other days you're going to spend hours and you come up with nothing. And sometimes, in fact, one of the pictures Jeremy was referring to, we were out at a dark site, and I was struggling all night long with a couple of mechanical issues. Finally got it working. Finally just said, oh, let me point at the Horsehead and the Flame Nebula. Started taking pictures. I wanted to get at least 10 at about 3 minutes each. After the first one, the battery started blinking red.
So Tim, make sure your battery's charged.
That's right. Make sure you get good battery. So I just let it run until it died, and just it was unbelievable. Had a great picture. So
fantastic. Well, let's talk about some of the equipment that you use when you're getting started in astrophotography. You got the mount right here. Why don't you just walk us through how you actually set up one of your telescopes that you use for astrophotography?
Absolutely, happy to. So, as Jeremy said, the mount is here. The mount is critical. I know a lot of people who buy really expensive scopes with great glass, and they kind of go a little bit lesser on the mount. You need to go the opposite way. If I were telling anybody to start in this, spend more money on the mount first. It's going to be the critical piece. You can always get some more optics, but that mount is going to be the really critical thing that you want. This particular mount is a Celestron CGM model. I have had it for about 2 years now, and it's really been good. Probably needs to go back and get some of the grease changed in it and cleaned up a little bit, maybe hyper-tuned or something like that. But for right now, with guiding, it's doing a nice job. I can get about 6 minutes or so with nice round stars all the time. So I'm going to show you how to set it up. Obviously, this is just the tripod portion of it. The bigger portion, which probably weighs about 35 pounds, has all the electronics, is this piece. Now, what we've already done is we've got this centered to where the equatorial mount is going to be pointing straight towards Polaris.
We're going to have here. This is the German equatorial mount.
Exactly, right through here. In fact, there's actually a little scope that will help you do some of the polar alignment if you look through this. And there are some apps on iPhone that you can tell, because you're going to want to know exactly where Polaris is and where Cassiopeia and Ursa Major is at that particular time, and exactly where it is, because you want to set this perfect. Because if you don't, your guiding is going to be terribly off, and you're going to be really frustrated, because you're going to start your camera, have some pictures going, and all of a sudden you're going to see it drift out of your focus. So great thing, do your polar alignment, spend extra time on it. As a matter of fact, I've got a couple of things that I'll show you, maybe if not in this video, but another video, about ways I have learned to kind of cheat that a little bit. And do polar alignment really precise. So obviously the first thing is go ahead and crank your mount up, make sure it's tightened down. There's a little eyepiece tray down here that helps stabilize everything.
Yep. We got the tripod, and then we got the mount.
That's right. Make it good and tight, make sure you've got everything snug. Double check everything always. You do not want to put your scope on here, your expensive scope, and then realize that you've got one of these levers off and the thing falls down, because it'll really do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
At this point in time, again, what I always want to make sure before I put the scope on, that I put the balance weight on. I do not want this thing falling off at all. So here's balance weight. It's about 22 pounds. You can get others. I know about, depending upon the instrument that we're going to use that night, I know about where it's going to be, but we are still going to go ahead and balance it as we go through the process. So I want to put the weight on. Now I'm going to reach over real quick and grab the scope. So this is a scope. It's a William Optics GT102. The scope on the top is the guide scope, and we're going to use that. We'll talk about that maybe in another video. So all we want to do right now is make sure that we get this thing saddled in real nice and tight. Alright. You definitely don't want anything falling down, so I always double check all the knobs, make sure everything is going to be tight and we're not losing anything. At this point in time, what we do is probably go ahead and do some of the balancing. Now, I would normally, in this particular scope, I could use either a CCD camera or a DSLR camera. And you really want to put it on there because you want the weight at this point in time. But right now, I'm just going to show you. What we want to end up doing is, the first thing is we want to balance this way. Okay? So east-west version. Now you can see that we're kind of flopping out on this. What I'd want to do is move the scope up, move the weight up, so we get the scope balanced pretty good in that line. The balance is pretty nice. Now, once you've done that, you can kind of double check the other side and make sure everything's okay. You're still holding fine. We get to this point and we go about midway, lock it down. Now what we want to do is we want to balance this section, because again, you don't want anything pulling off of it one way or another. So to do that, same thing, we let it go. Now you can see right now, this is falling forward. And the reason it's falling forward is there's some really big glass in here. This is a triplet, so there's a lot of glass right in this section. Very heavy. Right here is where our DSLR or CCD camera is going to be, but right now we're just going to try to balance it like this. So you can see that it's kind of flopping that way. What I'd really do here, just to be safe, is I would kind of loosen everything up and slide it back until I got my balance point just right. Now, if you still have a problem with that, and you can see we're probably pretty close right here. So we've got it balanced in both directions, and so, you know, if I had the DSLR on it, I'd be pretty happy with this. Once you've got that, move it all the way back to your index points. So you have the index point this way, you'll have your index point this way, and at that point in time, now we're ready for the next step, which is going ahead and doing our polar alignment and then our star alignment, so we can make sure we've got everything done.
Very good. So this is the actual setup. Now talk about the telescope itself, the type of telescope that you're using in this particular case.
Sure. This is, again, a William Optics 103 GT refractor.
So it uses lenses. Again, refractors use lenses, reflectors use mirrors.
Exactly. On top of it, you'll see this other thing that looks like, well, why do you have two scopes? Well, this is also a guide scope. It's also a refractor. And what we're going to end up doing with this one is we'll end up putting a camera on the back of this one as well as for guiding. And what will happen is this particular camera will pick out a star within the field of view, and it will watch that star very closely. Any slight movement of that star, it's going to send a message back to the mount and adjust the mount and tell the mount, move this way, move north, south, east, west, whatever, to keep that particular star in focus, which in turn keeps the deep sky object in focus as well. Now, my suggestion is refractors are easier. I know a lot of people sell the big Schmidt-Cassegrains. They're great. For the bang for the buck, they're terrific. In fact, I have one. We can go over that one as well later on. But for right now, I guess starting out, my suggestion would be it's easier for a refractor. Now, the biggest thing you're going to be looking at for anything with astrophotography is what's the F ratio. F ratio is the focal length divided by the aperture. I'm sorry, just went brain dead there for a second.
That's right.
So once you do that and you calculate that, for the Schmidt-Cassegrains, I have a Schmidt-Cassegrain 8-inch. It's got a F10 focal ratio.
Which is a long focal ratio.
Long focal ratio. It means you're going to have to stay focused on that particular object for a long time to be able to get all the photons collected that you want. In this particular one, it comes standard as an F7, so it's faster there. I also have a focal reducer and a field flattener that goes on that reduces it even further down to about 5.6. So it's reasonably fast, especially when you put a DSLR on the back of it and kind of collect some of those things. Later on, I guess we can sure get into some other things, but you want to know about focusing, you want to know about setup, different types of cameras, filters, you name it. But the place to start, again, I think is always going to be your mount. Don't cheap out on your mount. Go big on your mount if you can. And then the next step, I personally would say a refractor for the first choice. And then after that, you can certainly move up some of those.
Yeah, so you can see the setup here, the sturdy mount, and then getting everything properly in place, as well as making sure all your screws are tight and everything's balanced out. And then you got the scope in place, and then you're ready to go. So very good. Well, again, thanks, Keith, for showing us this setup for one of the telescopes that you use for astrophotography. And again, guys, I want to remind you that the Memphis Astronomical Society meets once a month, first Friday of each month at Christian Brothers University, Assisi Hall, room 155. Meetings start at 8 o'clock p.m. And we conduct 2 dark sky observing sessions every month, if the weather's clear, at a dark sky location in northwest Mississippi. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website, memphisastro.org, and subscribe to our YouTube channel also, youtube.com/Memphis Astron Society. For Keith Lattiole, I'm Jeremy Veldman. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on our next episode of Telescope Tips.